but gone, you're left hanging. You get angry with the politicians because they need to go. They need to do something about this. They need to smooth this out.
But there's nothing smooth in what the UK's Brexit minister has to say. He wants to rewrite the Northern Ireland Protocol, the device used to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland.
And we now face a very serious situation. The protocol is not working. It's completely lost consent in one community in Northern Ireland. Our proposal looks more like a normal treaty in the way it's governed, with international arbitration instead of a system of EU law ultimately policed in the court of one of the parties, the European Court of Justice.
There's puzzlement in Belfast on why the UK is taking such a hard line when there seemed to be more hope of a compromise from Brussels. And so is this last-minute posturing on the part of the UK government? If it isn't, then there's a serious escalation to this crisis ahead. This at a time when it would appear the majority of people in Northern Ireland want an end to this standoff. Protests about the sea border had been led by unionists who say they're being cut off from the UK. Before becoming Prime Minister, Boris Johnson had told the Democratic Unionist Party 3 years ago that he didn't want to see Northern Ireland left in the lurch by a border in the sea.
No British Conservative government could or should sign up to any such arrangement.
That assurance fell by the wayside. The people of Northern Ireland could be forgiven for feeling betrayed, and while unionist politicians welcome the harder line from the British government, there's a feeling of unease for many people living here. Andrew Simmons, Al Jazeera, Belfast.
Okay, I think we're going to pause on that because this goes on for quite a while. And we can go back and discuss it now. So who's got the most English background? Isn't that you, Jim? Doesn't your ancestry go back to England and Northern Europe?
Yeah, I'm a mongrel. Yeah, this issue is an interesting issue because Northern Ireland has a special Brexit deal, which keeps it in the EU's market for goods and allows free trade with the EU. But it means that goods coming from England face checks and controls because they're coming in and they have to go through EU spot checks. So the British are basically complaining. They basically want a new plan that would remove about 80% of the spot checks. And this is where they're having a big fight. And the other aspect of this that was difficult was that it impacts on Ireland. And so Ireland, in the midst of this, was saying that this could jeopardize their agreement, their peace agreement in the north. But they introduced what they call the Northern Ireland Protocol, and it was introduced to help prevent checks along the border. And so this is what they're trying to right now negotiate, because it, what it does is it jeopardizes, as I say, the peace process, the whole Good Friday Agreement that they reached with the IRA. And so this is one of the reasons why this is an issue that's of importance.
So, okay, good enough. What about you, Mike? You got something to say about this situation in Ireland? Michael? Oh, I'm not getting Mike on this. Okay. How about you, Dennis? Are you familiar with all about the Troubles?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Say it again.
The Troubles, Ireland, Northern Ireland and England.
What about it?
Well, we just saw a clip about it. As Jim said, they made a special deal with Brexit for Ireland.
And, yeah, I don't know too much about that aspect.
Okay. All right, let's go to another clip then. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that, Jim? I don't think so, right?
No, it just is a constant problem politically.
Okay, great. So let's go to Nigeria, okay? So just give me a moment here. And let's go back here. Let's say Nigeria. Okay. And come here and say share. Oh, we don't want to share that. Chrome, there we go. Nigeria. There it is. Okay, share, baby. And here we go.
If the markets remain closed, how do we feed our families?
Let me come back to the beginning of this. Okay, there we are.
Defiant traders display their goods at this weekly market despite a government order to shut down. Like many traders here, Isiaka Bello says his grains could be confiscated or may even lose his life if gunmen strike. But he has to take the risk.
If the markets remain closed, how do we feed our families? What about those who have to go to work daily in order to buy food? Do we expect them to carry guns and rob?
Here at Kaduna's biggest cattle market, traders say they're unable to bring in new stock because of the ban on the movement of cattle. Much of what is here is old stock. And they say because of an 80% decline in the number of animals coming in, the prices have increased.
Restrictions have cut telecommunications, banned the movement of goods, and closed rural markets in many areas of at least 5 states. This, says the government, is hindering the criminal operations of armed men known locally as bandits. They've turned kidnap for ransom into a lucrative business.
The wisdom of banning movement of cattle into or outside the state is to stop that corridor that they get source of funding by selling Russell cattle. Now, coming to the weekly market, I have also explained that is why the markets that they get access to food and other logistics. Now, you also look at the telecoms, the shutdown of telecom services in these ungoverned spaces. One, communication is very critical. It's at the center of negotiation for ransom. As we speak, air interdictions, air missions are in progress. And day in, day out, security forces are taking the bandits out.
But analysts say to stop the slide into anarchy, the government must address acute shortages among the ranks of security forces.
We have quite few number of policemen, quite few number of servicemen. This is a country of over 200 million, and we have less than 400,000 to 500,000 military men, policemen combined. This is unacceptable.
In desperation, some Nigerian states are training and arming militias to help fight armed groups. But still largely outgunned, the militias remain poorly equipped to confront the threat posed by bandits with superior weapons. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Kaduna.
Okay. All right. So that's a situation where because of a high index of crime, they had to create restrictions to stop. I guess there's a guerrilla warfare going on too. Isn't that where Boko Haram is?
Boko Haram is to the east,
it's to the north,
Kaduna. It's
in
that area. I mean, remember, there's 2 areas in Nigeria. The northern part of Nigeria is predominantly Muslim. The southern part of Nigeria is predominantly Christian. And the Kaduna state is essentially in the northwestern part of Nigeria. And what they're referring to is that that's a spillover of the kind of social dysfunction that helped create Boko Haram. I mean, Boko Haram is a very complicated movement in terms of how it's politically created. So what they're referring to in Kaduna is a major industrial center in Nigeria. It's a site where they have textile industries, plastic, pharmaceuticals, leather goods, etc. And they also have been impacted by the decline in, actually the increase in Chinese imports, because that's impacted the local economy and knocked out the textile industry up there. So there's a lot of unemployment in Kaduna. And what they're referring to is that there's all sorts of social dysfunction, including Islamist movements and banditry, that's further from the area of Boko Haram. Boko Haram is in the northeastern part of Nigeria and spilled over into the bordering states of Niger, Cameroon, Chad. And the area that they're afraid of in Kaduna is near the capital of Nigeria. And one should keep in mind that just a few months ago, the president of Nigeria had Anthony Blinken come and talk to him about they wanted to have the Americans increase their military presence in Nigeria to fight against Islamic guerrillas. So that's an aspect of it that has to be brought into the picture. But see, there's Kaduna on the map. Kano is the capital of Nigeria, and you see in the to the east there, the city of just if you skim to the see that city there, Maiduguri. That's the capital of the state of Borno, and Borno is where the Boko Haram basically sprung as a movement. That particular part of Nigeria. Anyway.
Well, what do you? I mean, omnipresent. The story behind the headlines was it really looks like third world for the most part. It's how could you get anything organized there to prevent anything from happening? It seems everybody's no sidewalks, no railroads, no buses, just people walking around with donkeys buying food at the market. Is that? I know they have big cities in Nigeria and major industries. And
oil is the major industry. That's if you look at that map down in the south at Port Harcourt, down there. If you look, that's that whole area, Orwin, Enugu, all that area is where the production of energy is, and there's huge fights about that because the army wants to control it. But Lagos, and Abuja is the capital of Nigeria. Lagos, some people estimate, is the biggest city in the world. Lagos, some people estimate there are 20 million people there. They don't know what the actual number of people are in Lagos. Lagos is one hell of a scene to actually see that firsthand. It's an amazing place, bustling energy of humanity. And Nigerians are incredibly energetic people, and when you meet the issue of the divide between Muslims and Christians, particularly in areas like Lagos, which is predominantly Christian, in the big cities, a lot of people who are educated, they don't get into these differences. But up in the north, one of the differences are that there's been a huge political battle to implement Sharia law up there in the northern states, and some states indeed have Sharia law. So that is where you get conflicts between the South and the different ethnic and tribal alliances that occur within Nigeria politically. And the army, ironically, is a national institution, but Nigeria is the largest state in Africa, 200 million people. And so, the issue of this kind of instability is something that drives the United States crazy. And as you can see, it borders on Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. Niamey is the capital of Niger. And that's where you have Islamist guerrilla movements in action, linking in with the guerrilla movements in Mali, and even going further and linking in with what's going on in Libya, where ISIS is. So there's a huge concern in the West. The French, by the way, have begun to pull back their fighting in Mali and Niger and the different parts of the Central African Republic and Bangui. So it's a complicated situation, but that's why it's important to keep educated and informed about these events in sub-Saharan Africa.
Now, let's follow up on anybody who can talk about this historically. I think it's a significant issue because Africa just falls out of the news. The only good news I heard is they have very relatively low COVID-19 cases and fatalities, which is something I haven't yet looked into to see the validity of that. But if anybody can come up, historically, these countries started to achieve independence in the 50s and 60s. I don't know the exact dates for each country. Was there a period of time when some of these states were on a predictable course towards stabilization, or has it always been, continued exploitation by Northern Europe or Northern countries to extract resources and pick a few people to put in a high position, pay some people off to be in charge to make sure that they can continue to get those resources, but the country doesn't develop? Now, China's coming in And they're trying, I don't know if they're actually doing things that are going to build the infrastructure for the population. But I mean, what does anybody know? It's very depressing to me because it looks like, hey, I couldn't solve this. I couldn't solve this unless I came in with, a fleet of, Army engineers building bridges and tunnels and schools and feeding people and developing the agriculture. You just can't do it overnight. But it's been a long time. It's been 70 years on the average as they started to get independence in the 50s. And there was a structure there when it was colonized that just should have advanced. Who can give a background on that history?
Well, I can.
Go ahead.
Maybe Dennis would want to chime in with his knowledge of some, But look, Ghana is the major country that achieves independence in '57, and the whole question of dependence and the issue of the continuation of colonization, where the whole question of neocolonization, because most of these economies were organized in terms of extractive industries, and also you had different styles of colonization from the different imperial powers. The French had their particular styles, the British had theirs, the Portuguese, the Belgians in the Congo, and the whole question of, people will debate, well, are they people better off when 1960, before colonization, basically the empires that collapsed? Because remember, some of the empires continued fighting until 1974, and certainly 1989, 91, 92, when the South African situation changed. But there was constant guerrilla wars going on throughout the continent. But the other problem of the countries, in terms of Nigeria, is a good example. Nigeria has, when they achieve independence, they are faced with a series of coups that, remember the Biafran Civil War. That in part was due to a struggle over control of the energy, because Biafra itself was in the area where the energy resources of Nigeria were concentrated. So you had the countries faced with whether the elites that remained in power, what was their connection to the metropole? What was their connection to the colonial states? And the whole question, you don't hear neocolonialism thrown out that much anymore as a concept, but what really occurred in these countries was the elites that had been reinforced by colonization and been used by colonization, and that included the apparatus set up by the various empires. They were the ones who transitioned in some cases to be the ones who ruled, and particularly the military in all these countries. So Nigeria had, by 1967 or 70, actually by 1970, they had 5 or 6 coups d'etats. And then the coups d'etats kept on going. They had one coup d'etat where when they finally got rid of the president, I think it was not Buhari, it was I'll remember his name, but his wife was caught going to the airport with $200 million of cash in her suitcases. So, so you have these situations where these guys are put in power and who serve the interests of the West and multinational corporations, and they're complete crooks. And so the Pandora Papers, that's just one sign of this structural problem that still exists in the world today, that comes from the period of colonialism.
Okay. Mike, can you chime in on this? Michael, are you there? Michael? Are you, I'm not getting anything from Michael. I don't know. I've got Michael up here. There he is. So Michael doesn't seem to be able to communicate on us. Okay, so Dennis, what's your viewpoint on Africa? And I'm talking about sub-Saharan Africa, but actually north of that, because Mali and everything, it's not really sub-Saharan, is it? Let's go take a look. How far we can go up here before we get, see? Northern Africa is Algeria, Libya, and Egypt.
Well, that's
Mali,
considered.
Mauritania, Niger, Chad, Sudan. That's just above sub-Saharan. So,
You want to hear?
yeah, go ahead.
You want to hear what I have to say?
Yeah, what's your comments on this?
My comment is that the United States and probably Britain and France have been interfering in Africa since the quote-unquote liberation days. So every time there was a leader and a movement that actually was on the side of the people and would offer some possibilities for sustainability, they disabled the movement. If you go to Central, it was the Congo. What was his name? Lumumba. The CIA murdered Lumumba. He's one of the strongest leaders in Africa. They also just destabilized. I forget what his name was, but in Ghana, he was very
Nkrumah.
Nkrumah. Well, they destabilized Nkrumah, and they finally got him out of office, and they got him out of the country. And Nkrumah was a strong leader too. So you're talking about revolutionary openings that were closed as fast as possible by the CIA and whatever else, and their fellow travelers, in wherever in the country. It's like it's the United States, it's the European Union, and Japan. They're called the Triad by the late Samir Amin, and they work to destabilize all independence movements. And let me put it another way to you. The only country in the world that has a sovereignty project as a whole, and that's actually working, is China. And that's the reason the United States is fighting them, because they don't want China to become a sovereign nation. They didn't want it to become a sovereign nation to begin with. And each time they made a deal with China, it was the hopes that it would wreck the Chinese economy. And it didn't do that because they wouldn't let America or any other country destabilize the communists. Although they're not really socialists at this point, but they are a lot more closer to socialism than any other country in the world. And you have a problem in Africa is that the United. If you want to see why other countries have a problem, it's because of the United States and its fellow travelers. There's a war going on all the time between the have countries and the have-not countries. And every time the have-not countries seem to get an independence movement that can really do something positive for themselves, the have countries try to destabilize them. And that's the war we're always fighting. And the fact that China has broken out and has a sovereign project is scary to the United States, because it can, in fact, be a beacon light and a moral support and a actual material support for a revolution. And that's what we're doing. It's between revolution and destabilization. And the same thing in the 60s. we had 60s and early 70s, we had revolutionary openings. And as fast as the revolutionary openings opened up, the oligarchs and, let's say, the FBI and the CIA worked to close them. The CIA was, when Malcolm X went to Europe and Africa for the Hajj, and he was followed by the CIA all the way, and they didn't like the fact that he was going for independence. They didn't like his language. They were scared of him, and that's why they killed him, because he was headed in the direction of organizing black people in all the Americas. It wasn't even just here, and he had connections with leaders in Africa, and I mean, he was speaking to what's his name? What's the name of the head of Egypt?
Anwar Sadat.
At that time, he was
No, before Sadat. Who was the leader?
Nasser.
I think that Malcolm actually met with Nasser, and he met with other leaders, and he was recognized by people in Africa as being an ally, and you have that all over the place. Wherever there is an independence movement or sovereign project in a country, we are out to destroy it. And that's what the whole problem is between the United States and China. They want to destroy Chinese sovereignty, basically. They want China to be subsumed under the U.S. banner and to be part of the U.S. world system, the imperial system. That's what they want. And that's why Martin Luther King was killed, too. They saw him as bringing poor people to Washington, D.C. They were scared shitless about that. And they also didn't like, I mean, they saw him working with labor. He was a leader of white people, too, at the end. It wasn't just black. If he would have just stayed with black people, it'd be okay. But then the thing that he did in 1967 was to make that speech at the church on Riverside Drive, and to talk about the war. He was not supposed to talk about the war. The only thing he was supposed to do was to work with black people. As soon as he started to have more power than they wanted him to have, he was dead. And as soon as he fought against what they were doing, he was dead too. So that's what you're dealing with all over the world. I mean, and the other thing is that the people who are, what do they call them again? Did you say the Muslim fanatics? What are they called? The Muslim fanatics.
You mean
the Salafists?
What?
Salafists?
Yeah,
No, Islamists. Islamists.
Well,
It's Islamists.
Salafists.
Yeah, well,
Salafists
what's his name? Samir Amin, before he died, he even talked about Islamists. He says they're confused. That they have a lot of confusion in what they're doing. And the United States is helping to destabilize them by taking out leaders that can actually clarify things. And the United States made them, from the United States point of view, they made a mistake going to China. They thought somehow they were going to usurp the situation with the Chinese and make them part of the imperial world system. And instead, what the Chinese did was to take the technology and build a competitive economic system. And they didn't like that. And that's what you're facing everybody. If you're talking about these situations that seem like they're confusing and everything like that, they've been destabilized. And the people who are the most confused or the most selfish or put ahead of the pack, and the people who are most clear and are really revolutionaries, or most of them have been either destabilized in general, or they have actually been murdered. And I mean, just check out all these countries. And by the way, Kenyatta in Kenya, he was a dictator, and he became a tool of the United States. He wasn't even, inside the country. Kenyatta was not a leader. He just happened to be in a particular position where he went to. I guess he got educated in England, and somehow the British wanted him to be the person they negotiated with because they could manipulate him. And
Okay, very good, Dennis. You got it covered.
okay, that's it.
I'm cutting you off because I want to ask another question about this, and let me bring it up here, and I think it'll come up. Let's see if it showed up there. Yeah, this is it. It's called the African Union. There's like many hundreds of states involved. Let's see what it says. The African Union is a continental union consisting of 55 member states located on the continent of Africa. The AU was announced in a declaration in Libya in 1999. That's 15 years ago or so.
Yeah, Muammar Gaddafi was murdered by the United States.
Okay, Muammar Gaddafi, yeah. And the bloc was founded in 2001 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and launched in Durban, South Africa. So it's got representation. Here's a little image of it. I guess these dark ones are the states that are participating in the African Union. So dark green, member states, light green, suspended states. So they suspended some states. So in any event, this is the beginning of an attempt to have unification or, concourse between the different countries, an assembly of the African Union, a semi-annual meeting of the heads of state and government of its member states. Okay. Is this just a boondoggle place to go, like going to Vegas for a convention? Or is this a serious organization that's trying to bring about improved conditions and coordination amongst the different countries in that continent?
Well,
go on.
Go ahead. Who's ever up?
You're asking me?
Go on.
Well, no. I'm asking whoever can answer the question in a pragmatic sense, not just it's Santa Claus is the problem, but what is it? Is the African Union working? Whatever the problems are, is the African Union addressing them?
It's not working.
Okay, all right. Let's get Mike. You haven't been on in a while. Are you there, Mike? Mike's not there. Okay, so Jim, because we heard a lot from Dennis. Let's go to Jim again.
All right. Well, first of all, you see the predecessor organization, the Organization of African States. The whole idea of Pan-Africanism is an idea that's been evolving since the 19th century, and certainly took shape in the 20s and 30s. W.B. Du Bois was a big advocate of Pan-Africanism. Marcus Garvey, all the different African leaders who were in the first wave of decolonization. The whole question of forming a state, a unity of Africa was always idealistically there. Now that, of course, is what got throttled by the multiplicity of interests of the European powers, the United States. I mean, remember that parts of Africa were controlled economically and politically by a whole variety of European states, and that impact lingered on to disrupt the whole question of African unity. Now, one of the reasons why the OAS was reorganized was because they did find elements of it were dysfunctional. But I would not agree with Dennis to say it's completely useless. The AU. One of the things they talked about in the question of forming the OAS was, well, why don't we all unite and go end this whole problem in South Africa? And they never could because of the disunity of the continent. Now, the question that was raised earlier about Samir Amin is an interesting character because he himself was a early proponent of what we now know as dependency theory. His dissertation done in the 50s is looked on as an extremely important work in the whole question of underdevelopment. He was a Marxist, an Egyptian Marxist, and his dissertation was not published until much later. Certainly in English, it wasn't published much later. Now, some of the things I disagree with Samir Amin is that Samir Amin intellectually, he viewed Pol Pot and Khmer Rouge, the whole experiment that happened in Cambodia, as an example that should be replicated in Africa itself. And I disagree with him on that. He did indeed know the leaders of the Khmer Rouge. He knew Khieu Samphan when he was going to school in France. Now, one thing that's interesting about Samir Amin is Samir Amin felt that the United States should be confronted by an alliance similar to that was waged against the Axis. And he felt that the European powers, particularly France, Berlin, he excluded England from this, that they should not take an Atlanticist approach. They should essentially align themselves with Russia, China, and he also included India in this, and oppose American power around the world. To end American power. He took a very decisive stand on that and argued that throughout his life. And another aspect of his thought that's quite interesting is when earlier Dennis was talking about Samir Amin and the question of his idea about political Islam. He viewed political Islam as essentially compromising itself with the ruling elites of Arab states. That he felt that they were compromising themselves with the bourgeoisie of those that were ruling in the Arab states. And so he viewed political Islam as betraying the working classes of the societies in the Islamic world. Because he was a communist. He was a nationalist during World War II. He became a communist afterwards. He was a secret member of the Egyptian Communist Party, which was banned by Nasser. And also Sadat. So Samir Amin remains an important intellectual figure. But to get back to the AU, I think the AU has functioned in ways now where it has become a multi-regional, multilateral body that is used to some extent by the West to implement its foreign policy initiatives. So, for example, when you impose in there Africa Command, the whole thrust of the United States in dealing with Africa in the past 25 to 30 years, forming a separate Africa Command. We have 5,000 troops in Djibouti that are involved in the fighting in Yemen and Somalia. Remember the incident where that Special Forces patrol was overwhelmed in Niger? They're fighting in that whole all those campaigns against Islamic militants. And the question of what motivates these people to fight. Why do you have Boko Haram? Why do you have these different movements in these different countries? They have tremendous instability domestically in their own societies for a variety of reasons. You can't just blame it on imperialism. Imperialism is part of it, absolutely. But you also have what has happened since decolonization in 1960. So the issue of these, I do regard the AU. I know guys who were ambassadors to the OAS. I knew guys who were ambassadors to the AU, and these were very serious political people who, I wouldn't dismiss of Western imperialism. Maybe you want to comment, Dennis, on this. Dennis, why don't you unmute? I see Michael's coming in. Dennis, why don't you add your 2 cents to this?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Dennis.
Okay. I just think it's a war against the people, basically, that has been happening since colonization, and the Western powers led by the United States still want the resources there, the minerals, and they're going after them. And the CIA is active in almost every country, and they're connected to I don't know, what is it called, MI, Military Intelligence 6 from the British and whatever for the French and the other countries. And there's a war going on that we never get reported on. And they're always trying to undermine the people's organizations. And I agree with Samir. I mean, the only sovereign project in the world is China, and you have to. I would talk about China, the United States, and this Belt and Road project that the Chinese have, and also China is getting very active in Africa. So we always want to talk about China and Africa versus the United States, and how the various powers are what do you call it? How everybody's aligned against each other, and we don't have too much of that information. Basically, that's like they don't talk about it in the news here. There's something happening all over the world, and in particular where there's resources, mineral resources, which Africa is rich in mineral resources. We have to investigate all of that, and then, I mean, I remember in the 60s and the late 60s and the 70s, you knew names of leaders from in Africa. You knew about movements. I don't really know any leaders anymore in Africa. I don't know any names. I knew people. I knew people from Kenya. I knew people from Nigeria. And I knew something about today. I'm just out of touch with all that stuff, and mostly it's because all of it's fizzled out, and the real power is with the United States imperialism, and they're afraid. They're afraid of China, and that's the key between the United States and China that we have to keep focused on in relationship to the rest of the world. That's what I would say. That's it. I don't have anything more to say.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, very good. Thanks a lot for that. Let me handle this backlash here. Okay. I'm trying to handle that.
Somebody?
Okay. So are you on, Mike? Okay, Mike, go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me
We're
now?
talking about the African Union.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Okay. Finally. All right. Well, I have comments going back to the Irish question, but I'll stick to this for a second. Let me just say that the rest of the world has been trying to rape and pillage Africa since whichever country was that, you could say the white man, but whatever man has set foot in it. So I don't think basically Africa has been not as a continent of sovereign nations, individual sovereign nations, but as merely just some natural resources to plunder at the expense of the people living there. So you can call it. I mean, it's been the victim of colonialism, imperialism, and it'll be the victim of whatever otherism sees fit to exploit Africa as a whole. We're talking about the majority of Africa and the countries therein. And until we stop with that attitude, it's going to go on, and the problems in Africa will continue to occur, and we'll continue to have this problem. And as far as using it as a you know, I don't even know if it's a battleground between political battleground between the so-called great powers, but I think it's just people looking to get what they can get out of it, and to you know, corner the natural resources or the markets there, and that's all. It's just exploitation. It's been going on for centuries, continues to go on, and nobody seems to have any desire to stop it.
Well stated. What was the thing about Ireland?
Oh, the thing I was going to say about Ireland is previously is that the protocol, the real problem there is that Northern Ireland, in other words, if it's going to be attached to Ireland, obviously, then they're trying to find a way to have both things at once, to be attached to the UK and to be attached to Ireland, which is part of the EU. Nobody seems to have found a way to do that. I don't know why. There probably is a way to do it, but obviously people are, you know, I don't know how that's going to work out, but I do know that it's vitally important that Northern Ireland keep its connection with Ireland itself. But how the goods and services move across the border, and then how much of a special relationship they can have with the UK is something else. I'm just surprised that with supposedly all these minds working on it, that nobody's found a workable solution yet. That's what I wanted to say about that.
Okay, thanks. So what I want to do here is, I'm going to have to mute your mic when you're not talking. What I want to do is move to an article that came out about Turkey and Syria. And then once we do that, which is here, we'll take a look at this. And then I have a background piece on it. So this is from Al Jazeera. And what we got here is the Turkish foreign minister says, well, Turkey says will do what is necessary after Syria attacks. So the Turkish foreign minister says the U.S. and Russia have not kept their promise to ensure the YPG withdraws from the border region. And let's find out, what is the YPG? Turkish foreign minister, somebody, whatever an interesting name it is, has said Turkey would do what is necessary for its security after what it described as a rise in cross-border attacks by the Syrian Kurdish People's Protection Unit, the YPG. So that's the Kurdish population, a subset of Turkey or a subset of Syria. They live in the border regions between them. And
no. The reason they're afraid of this is they view the YPG in terms of their long battle with the Kurdish nationalist elements inside Turkey itself. They've been waging a long guerrilla war back and forth for a couple of decades.
Right.
And so they view the YPG. YPG is, they view them as essentially an arm of the Kurdish nationalists inside Turkey. Now, the YPG, from our point of view, from the United States point of view, are the people that fought against ISIS. So when you had those battles along the border, where there was a famous town on the border with Turkey, where the Turkish military sat on the border and were basically controlling exit and insit into that particular town. And I just, for the name of it slips me. The YPG were the people who were fighting against the ISIS. And I know guys who were leftists who volunteered from Turkey to fight with the YPG. I know Americans who volunteered to fight with the YPG against ISIS. So it's not so complicated where you can sort of glom on it, you know, the usual kind of, okay, because the United States Special Forces is deciding to make the YPG more combat effective. Well, all these guys who are communists from Turkey and all these guys who are anarchists from the United States who went to fight there, they're not going there to fight because they want to be tools of American imperialism. Maybe they were. I don't think so. But the YPG is a tough issue. Trump wanted to abandon them. He basically wanted to throw them to the winds. And if you recall, that was one of the reasons why there was controversy in the Department of Defense, because he just wanted to throw these guys to the winds. Okay, we're done with them. The hell with them, because we wanted to come out with an agreement with Turkey, with Erdogan, to serve his own political interests. And so that's where this issue is coming into play.
Okay, so what I want to do here is play a clip of background. This clip is about a year old, but I think it's going to be good. So let me find it. I think this is it. No, that's the Qatari government, Turkey, society. Where's my clip? Going viral. Oh, this is it. Ah, here we go. 1 second. Let me get this background here. There we go. Okay. And then I come here and I say, stop screen, share screen. Takes a moment, folks. And here it comes. Share. And the commercials, and here comes the video. Oh, I have to move it up here now.
Policymakers in Ankara have genuine interests in Syria and
come back to the beginning.
War is the continuation of politics by other means, and nowhere is this more evident than in Turkey's involvement in the Syrian battle space. Although policymakers in Ankara have genuine interests in Syria and see the ongoing fight as an exercise of geopolitics, the stakes are even higher for the Turkish president. For Erdogan, Syria is also about political survival, as it defines his endgame. I'm your host Shirvan, and welcome to Caspian Report. As often happens, our content gets blocked in some countries. NordVPN allows you to bypass such firewalls by hiding your IP, so curriculum of Turkey. The secular of 2011, when Syrians first took to the streets to protest against the rule of President al-Assad, Erdogan was busy introducing religious substance in the national educational curriculum of Turkey. The secular opposition had just turned to infighting, and Erdogan's ruling party, the AKP, was riding a wave of populism that seemed unstoppable. Be that as it may, when Syrian refugees arrived in the thousands on Turkish soil, Erdogan's domestic plans were disturbed. Slowly but assuredly, as the number of Syrian refugees in Turkey increased by the hundreds of thousands, Ankara was being drawn into the affairs of Damascus. By the time the number of Syrian refugees in Turkey eclipsed 1 million, Erdogan's attitude towards al-Assad had changed dramatically. The Turkish government began arming, training, and funding opposition forces doing battle against the al-Assad government. Soon enough, Turkey became a haven for the Syrian opposition, as well as a conduit from where foreign jihadists made their way into Syria. When the jihadist forces gained a foothold in Syria and Iraq, the flow of refugees inflated. Millions of Syrians fled to Turkey, and the state was forced to construct vast camps with all the logistics to host the new arrivals. Turkey doesn't get the credit it deserves when it comes to the Syrian refugees, but the country has taken in more refugees than any other nation, more than the entire Arab world combined, and more than all of the European Union. Erdogan convinced the Turkish public that accepting refugees was an act of morality, compassion, and solidarity. The narrative worked, and political opposition to the influx of refugees remained mute. But since day one, there was an inescapable truth to this equation. Turkey could not host the Syrian refugees indefinitely. The 2014 presidential election was a rude awakening for Erdogan. He managed to win at least 51% of the vote, enough to get re-elected, but he had lost the confidence of voters from the southeast of Turkey, which was predominantly Kurdish. The pro-Kurdish HDP and its chairman Demirtas had chipped away at Erdogan's popular vote. A year later, Erdogan's AKP had lost its majority in the parliament for the first time in over a decade. Again, a loss that was brought about due to the success of the HDP, which continued to win over Kurdish votes. Being a man of shrewd politics, Erdogan changed his strategy. While earlier he led genuine peace talks to reconcile with the PKK separatists in order to appease Kurdish voters, which came close to a peace deal, after the HDP blowback, however, Erdogan struck a political alliance with Turkish nationalist MHP to secure a majority rule. The nationalist faction had only one policy. They strongly opposed reconciliation with the PKK. As Erdogan capitulated to the nationalist demand, years of peace talks with the PKK came to an abrupt end. The president's policy of accommodation and reconciliation made a U-turn and went full anti-Kurdish. Thus, arguably, the rise of the pro-Kurdish HDP was perhaps the worst thing that could have happened to the needs of the Kurdish voters. Subsequently, Turkey's objective in Syria shifted according to the AKP's alliance with the MHP. Instead of regime change in Damascus, priority was given to deny the YPG, which had links to the PKK, from establishing an autonomous state in northeastern Syria. Erdogan, who was now in partnership with Turkish nationalists, shifted insurgents from Aleppo, Hama, Homs, and Idlib in west and northwest Syria to attack the YPG in the northeast instead. In 2016, when al-Assad's army retook the city of Aleppo and other major cities, Erdogan had redirected the Syrian rebel forces to the YPG front lines. It was a striking change of policy, so much so that by 2017, Erdogan was back to working with al-Assad as well as Russia and Iran to create a new balance of power in Syria, one that excluded the YPG. The Astana peace talks established several de-escalation zones where all belligerents would abide by a local ceasefire. However, in practice, with the blessing and backing of Putin, al-Assad frequently violated the truce and made small but numerous military gains. Meanwhile, Turkey launched its own military incursion into the YPG-controlled Afrin area, while the Russians, Syrians, and Iranians looked the other way. Erdogan's policy on Syria wasn't the only thing that changed according to the political landscape. In the 2019 municipal elections, the AKP lost control in nearly all major cities, including Istanbul. 2 decades ago, Erdogan had acted as the mayor of Istanbul. Now he could not even muster the popular vote over the city he once governed. The 2019 municipal election was a significant blow to Erdogan, and perhaps the weakest point in his political profession in over 25 years. Part of the AKP's failure was rooted in the lira's currency crisis, which was brought on by bad loans. The other part was due to the growing public discontent with the presence of 3.6 million Syrian refugees on Turkish soil. Being pious and acting with a moral compass is easier in times of abundance, but when faced with an economic crisis, people tend to blame the unfamiliar for their grievances. Turkey's open border policy towards Syrian refugees was always meant to be a temporary resolution. The currency crisis, however, had depleted the public's patience, and Erdogan, being the politician he is, acted accordingly. To regain public trust and convince future voters, Erdogan adjusted his refugee policy. Turkish security agencies set up a hotline to gather information on illegal immigrants, while law enforcement services stepped up house searches and the detention of illegal Syrian refugees, with the goal being to relocate the refugees out of the major cities. Much like his U-turn on Kurdish policy, Erdogan's agenda shifted according to the new political tides. He no longer portrays himself as a patron of the pious, but as a nationalist who wants the Syrian refugees to go back to their broken homes. The trouble, and this is something they learned in Europe as well, is that refugees have inalienable rights according to international law. One cannot merely resettle millions of refugees back into a war zone. The Turkish solution for this conundrum is to carve out a large enough buffer space along Syria's border with Turkey. The envisioned safe zone would sit east of the Euphrates River and measure at a length of about 370 kilometers and a depth of 32 kilometers. An area large enough to host at least 2 million refugees and thereby rid Erdogan of a political liability that are the Syrian refugees. The Turkish plan includes the construction of some 200,000 homes, as well as institutions for security, education, healthcare, religion, and recreation. All of it would be internationally funded, but the construction projects would be licensed to Turkish firms, which would provide the Turkish GDP growth rate with some serious points. The overall plan kills two birds with one stone. It settles the refugee question while reanimating the economy. The ruling party in Ankara hopes that this will win back the popular vote. In a Turkey that is cash-strapped and where anti-Arab sentiment is rising, the government feels the pressure to illustrate to its public that it is not prioritizing foreign refugees over its own citizens. Thus, despite all the flaws Erdogan's plan withholds, and despite the lack of funding, the president is pushing the agenda regardless. The irony is that Washington and Brussels are now criticizing Ankara's harsh attitude towards Syrian refugees, while they themselves have essentially locked their borders. Erdogan, who is increasingly isolated by his former allies, has been left to deal with the brunt of the refugee dilemma on his own. In response to this damned if you do, damned if you don't narrative, the Turkish president recently stated that he would open the gates and ignite a new refugee crisis in Europe if no aid is given to Turkey. The tense political standoff illustrates just how far their relations have depreciated. All in all, Turkey's endgame in Syria has shifted over the years according to the domestic political needs of the Ankara government. From bolstering religious credentials at home and the overthrow of al-Assad to denying the YPG a state and the resettling of millions of refugees. The Turkish involvement in Syria is perhaps a textbook case of how war and politics complement one another. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Credit goes to our gracious community on Patreon for giving us the means to produce content like this.
Okie doke. So I'm not muted. Okay. That report, it was about a year old. So I don't know that much has changed strategically between the Kurds, the Turks, and the Syrians. But I think the report did demonstrate the actuality of the difficulty of taking in 3 million refugees and the housing, even if the housing and substance, the sustaining of them, even if it's all handled with foreign donations. Still, it's a major influence in the country itself. And especially if they're a majority Kurds and there's any kind of a deviation from the major religion. I think Turkey is, for the most part, Shiite.
No,
Sunni. Okay.
Sunni.
That's like Iran, right?
No. So
okay.
Iran
Sunni is
Shia.
like Saudi
Iran
Arabia. And Iran is Shia. Yeah, I always get the two mixed up. Okay. So, Jim, you want to hit first? You want to go up to bat first on this?
Well, first of all, this is something that is a product of the politics in the Middle East going on for decades. the Kurdish nationalist sentiments going back to the First World War. They've gone through various iterations of fighting against all the powers around them, getting abandoned. The famous abandonment of the Kurds by the CIA and the Iranians under the Shah when they worked out a deal with Saddam Hussein back in the 70s. They were abandoned and they were being trained and, motivated by the CIA and MI6 and the Savak, etc. And to the present. So you have a situation in that part of northeastern Syria where when the United States pulled out in 2019 from the border areas, the Turks rolled in there to further weaken the entire autonomous region that had been set up by the YPG, by those aligned with the PKK, the group that the Turkish government had been fighting a counterterrorism war for 20 years with or more. And so the areas along there, it's sort of interesting to see that Kazemian report, because basically what they want to do, that's sort of interesting, that little slice of land they showed, because in reality, there's a large amount of that territory that's controlled by the YPG. So if they're going to sit there and create this autonomous zone, what they showed, that big yellow sign there, well, that whole yellow part of the map, that map indeed includes parts that are administered by the Kurdish separatists. So they'd have to come in and have a confrontation with them and a battle with them and annihilate them, which is what is what the YPG fears, and why they align themselves with the United States. And so the United States is caught in this conundrum with these guys as a result of having used the YPG quite successfully. If you remember the Battle of Raqqa, the YPG was used as an offensive force and trained and organized to fight against ISIS. So it's sort of these issues of the remnants of, those that are left over from fighting against ISIS. And you still have these complicated situations politically in Syria, where Erdogan has aligned himself, as they say, with Putin and Assad. And so they'd have to sit there and align themselves and be involved jointly in operations against the YPG. So let's see what happens with that.
Okay. Dennis, you got a comment? Or Mike, how about you? You got a comment on this situation with the Kurds and the Syrians and the U.S.?
Yeah, basically, first of all, that report sounded like when they thanked their patrons, one of their patrons might have been the Erdogan government itself. They seem to be at pains to make excuses for him. But yeah, the Kurds have been getting the short end of the stick.
He was making excuses for which government?
The Erdogan government. Turkish government.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So but the Kurds have been getting the short end of the stick for a long time. The most striking example was when the shithole president, I'm referring to Donald Trump, since he used the word shithole to respond to other countries, but we all knew who the shithole was, when he just basically said, fuck them. But they've, again, always, they too have always been getting the short end of the stick and being abandoned, and betrayed after they did work in tandem with the United States. They were betrayed by the United States. They were betrayed by the Turks. They were betrayed by the Syrians, by the Iranians. You name it. Anybody in in other words, any of those countries betrayed them. I mean, a couple of, I guess, to the extent that they were involved, Israel and possibly Egypt didn't abandon them, but they only had peripheral involvement in it. And Europe, for the most part, has been playing games with them. And China and Russia have been using them for their own, their own political football. So, yeah, the Kurds, somebody somewhere has got to stand by the Kurds, besides the Kurds themselves, I guess. But what's going on there? Yeah, the geopolitical shifts. This is actually pretty much predictable. It's just going to switch back and forth according to the domestic needs of the of those particular countries and the financial desires of the and geopolitical desires of the larger powers. So I don't know what's going to happen here, except it looks like it's we're heading for more military conflict. This time between possibly between Turkey and Syria. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, except for the fact that sooner or later somebody's going to betray the Kurds. That's how it looks to me, at least.
I was going to say that's what we can look forward to that for Christmas. That's our Christmas present this year. Hey, Dennis, give me a wrap up on this thing with the Kurds being betrayed by the U.S. and maybe the Turks, and who's on what side?
It all depends on who. I don't know the politics of the situation right now. What I know is that the Kurds are looking for independence, and they're not getting it at this point.
Okay.
That's the situation, and I mean, I have to re-examine it. It all depends on what the situation is.
Okay.
The circumstances. The problem. The problem in all these situations is that the United States does not want anybody else to be in control besides itself. And there's always a problem there. And Russia came into Syria to block the United States. And they more or less succeeded. So the United States is not winning the war for hegemony. It wants a unipolar world, which it had after the Soviet Union broke up around 1990 or so. But it's becoming more of a multipolar world. And even our conversation, we're talking about Turkey. I mean, Turkey's doing what it's doing because Erdogan, whatever Erdogan's doing is because of the politics in his own country. And he's using the international situation to manipulate the situation at home, basically.
Okay.
Because he's certainly not going to have a war with Russia, and he's not going to have a war with the United States. And after that, all he's got is a little bit of involvement to gain power in his own country. And that's the other thing. He's a dictator. He's another dictator. And that's a problem. And if you look all over the world, fascist and near-fascist leaders, and that's a big problem for all of us, all the time. And
okay.
And I just want to say one other thing, and we have collective problems as a human race, starting with global warming, and we're not doing, and also we have to do something about nuclear weapons. Of course, the United States and China are in a very tense military situation at the present, and it needs to be the tensions need to be lowered. We need some agreements with them, which means that we need some I guess weapons deals with them to lower the tensions. I'll leave it at that. I mean, I think when it gets back to who's got more power to do what, and that's unfortunate. We need more popular uprisings all over the place. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Does anybody disagree with that?
Oh, I don't know. Somebody's going to make money on those uprisings. I know that. Okay. Let me just see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to close down. The only other thing I had to run here was a commentary about the degradation in Afghanistan now that the Taliban's back. I'm surprised that some songs haven't come back out yet. You know, the Taliban's back. They're gonna take all your money. Who do? Remember that song? My boyfriend's back. The Taliban's back. So it's an Al Jazeera article or YouTube about that. But I think we've covered enough on international stuff for this episode. So I'm going to roll us out now. This is Going Viral, a political analysis program. And it's been Ken Aaron on the West Coast, Jim Dingman, and Dennis Goldstein, and Michael Jankowicz on the East Coast. And that's the end of this session. Thank you for watching and listening. And there we go.